So a while ago, one of my subscribers, J-Boy, he asked me, what is it like motorcycling in Japan compared to Singapore? Is it more expensive there or is it cheaper? And I'm sorry it took so long for me to get this video up, but I'm gonna answer you. And since I've been to London before, I'm gonna add that city into this question as well. So now let's begin with how easy it is to get into motorcycling. First, you need a license. Okay, as far as I know, in Japan, if you want to get the smallest possible license, which is standard 400cc and below, you need to be 16 years old. Alright, if you are 18, you can get the license that rides on any kind of motorcycle possible, and these two tiers are not related. So if you're 18, you don't need the 16-year-old license beforehand. If you're in London, UK in general, the earliest you can get a license would be at 17, a proper motorcycle license that will restrict you to 125cc. When you're 19, you can get a license, a restricted license, but that allows you to ride somewhere along the power of a Duke 390 at 19 years old. So if you have an A2 license and you're 19 and you've got an A2 license, the next time you can get the full A license that lets you ride any motorcycle in the UK would be 21 years old. If you don't wish to wait, if you don't wish to do any of the prior tiers, you can just wait until you're 24. You don't have to do any previous tiers to get a full license once you're 24. You can just go and get an A license straight away. Now in Singapore, that's where it starts to get difficult. Now the earliest you can get the smallest license possible, which is 200cc and below, is 18 years old. And to progress further up to the next tier, which allows you to ride up to 400cc motorcycles, requires you to be 19 and have taken the prior tier. And to ride an unlimited license, which allows you to commute on any motorcycle, even a Hayabusa, requires you to be 20 years old and have taken the prior two tiers on our licensing scale. So obviously speaking, the hardest country to actually get to ride on the bike of your dreams is gonna be in Singapore. Okay, the actual test difficulty being a very subjective thing, so that's going to be up to your own mileage how well you do in the test. But as far as the system is concerned, Singapore is going to be the hardest to get a full license to ride whatever hell you want. Now getting into motorcycles, once you have the license, you want to get a bike. So we're going to be talking about the cost of owning a motorcycle in Singapore. Okay, let's start with Tokyo. We'll use the Honda MSX125 Grom as an example. How much does a Grom cost in general in Tokyo? I'd say maybe about 350,000 yen, depending on which dealership you go to. So that's about 4,500 Singapore dollars. In the UK, in London, depending on which dealership you go to, it's somewhere around 2,900, 3,000 pounds. Okay, that's about 5,000 Sing dollars. In Singapore, to get that dinky little MSX125 Grom, it's gonna cost you at least $12,000. Brand new, $12,000. Alright, $12,000 could buy you an entire car in the United States. So obviously, starting your motorcycling career in Singapore is gonna take a lot of patience, a lot of saving up, a lot of money. Now let's move on to the cost of maintenance. Every bike requires some upkeep, of course. So other than the taxes, which is covered in the cost of getting the bike owned in the first place. You know, maintenance, I would say this is where Singapore has, you know, pretty much most of the other countries beat, because first of all, parts are quite cheap in Singapore. Labor cost is pathetically cheap, whereas in, let's say, Tokyo or London, if I want to get my bike fixed at a workshop, labor costs are amazingly expensive. You could pay, I don't know, a few $100s just on labor alone, and you're not including the price of parts. Whereas in Singapore, labor costs usually nothing. If you buy the part with them, they will replace it for you for free. Okay, parts also in general in Singapore are a lot cheaper. Most of the parts that Singaporean workshops and dealerships bring in are sourced from Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, where labor costs are extremely low. Importing them into Singapore is extremely cheap because of the distance. Whereas in London or Tokyo, if I want to get a part, I'd have to either get something that's original. I mean, of course, they're better quality, but they are manufactured with expensive Japanese and British labor. And if you want to get cheap, you know, Southeast Asian parts in either London or Tokyo, it's a option. Of course, you can get them, but you're gonna pay a little bit more than you would in Singapore, because of course, you know, importing them to Tokyo and London is going to cost more because of the distance involved compared to Singapore. And you know, the general cost of housing those parts there in general, whereas it's a lot cheaper in Singapore. Gas in London is also pretty expensive. The last time I was there, it was like, what, £2 per litre. And I think Tokyo has the cheapest petrol out of the three. You know, Singapore, for our 95, we pay about $2 for 95. In Tokyo, it's 130 to 140 yen for regular. Then of course regular in London is £2. So, you know, Singapore is also pretty cheap as far as gas is concerned. So actually running your bike, keeping your bike maintained in Singapore is not hard. It's pretty cheap in general. Parking maybe a bit more expensive in London and Tokyo. Singapore, parking for motorcycles is, I would say, it's pretty fair. Now let's talk about the riding experience in general. Okay, I'd have to say this is a no-brainer. Alright, Singapore has a very pathetic riding experience. The thing I hate about, you know, I mean, let's say if you were in London and you have a bike, you know, you could go to many places, amazing places. You go to the southeast, towards the coast, beautiful sights. You could go to the southwest towards Stonehenge, Avebury-Henge, beautiful sights. You could see really nice fields on both sides of the roads along the, you know, once you go out along the M4 to more rural areas. Very amazing riding experience. Plenty of places to go off-road as well in the southeast of England. And if you were in Tokyo, you could, you know, choose to take the road northeast to Twin Rings Motegi if you are a track demon. If you like to cruise around Tokyo itself, you know, there's a Bayshore route. You could cruise along the Bayshore route. Very nice, a scenic expressway within the city confines. If you choose to go to the southwest, to the west, there is, you know, the road up to Mount Fuji. Beautiful place to go and take a ride up the Hakone, you know, pass. Whereas in Singapore, what do you have? It's mostly streets like this, pretty boring. You can't even go further than 90 legally in Singapore. Alright, and if you want to tell me that, you know, you could have the option of going to Malaysia, there's so much opportunity in Malaysia, that's where you're wrong, because this isn't a fair comparison. In the UK and in Japan, if you rode in Tokyo, you could go outside the city boundaries without having to go through immigration. You wouldn't have to deal with that traffic that everybody has to deal with when trying to enter Malaysia from Singapore. And worst of all is that, you know, Tokyo, London, Singapore, you know, they are all first tier cities. But Tokyo and London, they have the opportunity to go outside to first tier countrysides where you don't have the, you know, the danger of being mugged, being robbed. Whereas in Singapore, if you try to go to Malaysia and you didn't go in a group, there is a high chance that you are gonna get mugged. I mean, that really depends on individual, but you know, as far as I'm concerned, going to Malaysia is just asking to get mugged. So what about road, you know, safety in general? I would say it's a mixed bag, okay? In Tokyo and in Singapore, I never had to worry about, you know, leaving my bike in anywhere in general, pretty much. You know, I rode a bicycle. Bicycles are easier to steal in general in Tokyo. I could ride my bicycle and just park it somewhere and get lost, and you know, you never have to worry about it getting stolen. In Singapore, it's the same deal. Bike thefts do happen, but they are pretty rare in general. Whereas while I was in London, that CBF 600 was staying locked under a chain to a pole, but no matter where I went, I would keep that shit locked up tight. Because bike thefts in London is through the roof. Especially if you rode an expensive sport bike, you better jolly well lock that shit up, because it is gonna get stolen easily. And as far as I know it, you know, most riders in London would say the same thing. You will lock your shit up. Now, but as far as road safety is concerned, everywhere else, you know, okay, not everywhere else, but Tokyo and London is way safer than Singapore. Singapore is a road safety nightmare. Alright, sure, we have better roads, we have safer roads, better maintained roads than both Tokyo and London. Okay, but the problem is that while in London and in Tokyo, people generally use their turn signals, they are alert, they are, you know, they try and keep to safe driving practices. In Singapore, nobody does that. Singapore is a clusterfuck of dangerous drivers. It's easy to commute every day and see at least one motorcycle, you know, injury along the highway. It is a nightmare here as far as motorcyclists are concerned. Now, what about, you know, the motorcycling culture, the motorcycling experience with, I mean, interpersonal thing in general? I would say Singapore doesn't have that, okay? London, you have amazing culture for motorcycles. There are people that own private collections that you could visit. You know, if you went to the Ace Cafe on a weekend or Friday nights, there is always a gathering there. Amazing, you know, culture gatherings, and you know, people being able to modify their vehicles and show them off. In Tokyo, it's the same. You can go to Akihabara UDX parking, or you know, there are various highway stops along the way around Tokyo that's only accessible by either a car or motorcycle that you can visit on the weekends. And true enough, there is always, you know, a gathering of enthusiasts that will hang around, chit chat, and share their riding stories or show off their bikes, their modded bikes. Whereas in Singapore, you have none of that. Nobody modifies their motorcycles in Singapore. It's pretty pathetic. Everybody goes for stock. And the thing, what's the worst thing of all is that in London you can have all those you know, classic bikes. There are collectors that collect classic bikes, you know, pieces of history, but there are no such things in Singapore at all. Another thing in general is that I would say that if you have watched my Singapore bike show vlog, you would have seen what it's like, you know, what the gatherings are like in Singapore. It's purely pathetic. It's so dull. if you were in Tokyo, it's so amazing. Everybody's excited, everybody is such an enthusiast, but in Singapore it's such a corporate affair. There is no soul to things in Singapore. So that's what it's like in Singapore. Okay, so in closing, where do I recommend you to start your motorcycling career if you're going to be an expat? Well, I would say that, you know, if you are planning to start it overseas, you know, anywhere but where you're from, please stay far away from Singapore. You can go to London, you can go to Tokyo. If you're an American, I would recommend you just going up to Canada or Europe in general. You could even go to South Africa and have a blast of your life, even though you're probably going to end up dead there. But just stay away from Singapore. Not only is it not worth your money because it's so expensive here, you are not going to get a full good experience on a motorcycle in Singapore. Not saying that, you know, if you are determined to, you can't have a good experience in Singapore, but in general, if you have better options, there are always better options than Singapore. So I hope you like this video. If you liked it, do give me a thumbs up and shoot me a comment down in the comment section below if you've got any further questions about what it's like to ride in Singapore if you're not from Singapore. And of course, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, do subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time. Peace out.